Today we're talking about friends. I think as we've gotten older, we've lost friends. It's been harder to maintain close friends. All of it's gotten harder. And so I want to talk about it. I think this is a problem that a lot of us are facing. And so this is a one of us episode, which basically means I sit down with a current quarter lifer to talk about a problem we faced during these years and how we can overcome it. Today's guest is a friend of mine, Megan. She is 30. She is a great friend herself. And together we unpack a number of things from the 3 pillars of adult friendships, key barriers and problems that get in the way of maintaining these friendships. And finally, we discuss a number of actionable things that we can do to improve our friendships. We really came prepared for this one. As you'll hear, a lot of this stuff that we talk about is based on research and studies about loneliness, about deep relationships, and how we can actually build better friendships, lose less friends. Like, how do we actually do it? That's really where we get into things in the second half of the episode. We also do, obviously, throughout share a number of stories from our own personal experiences too. It's not just all studies and stuff. But I just want you to know that it is backed in research. And so just overall, I think this is more of a heart problem that we're talking about today, which I personally love. I think this is such a big problem. I've said that before, but I love this episode. I'm excited for you to listen to it. It's definitely a little bit longer than normal so far, but if it wasn't all good, then I would have got rid of it when I was editing it. So appreciate you being here and listening, as always. Today's fake sponsor is unread texts. This might be super common, super normal that people already do, but it's a game changer for me. And so if you ever open a text and realize, like, for whatever reason, I don't want to answer this right away, but later you forget about answering and now you're an asshole that is just ignoring one of their friends. So how we can work around that is when you open that message, go back to like your main messages screen and tap and hold on that person's message chain. And then you'll get a pop-up that says marked as unread. Just hit that. And now you have a physical reminder that says, oh, I have to text John or Susie back later, but I don't need to do it right now. That's at least how you do it on iPhone. If you have an Android, I don't know what to tell you. It's probably the same thing. But it's just finding those little ways to, as we'll talk about today, maintain relationships and not ignore people, but also manage the daily busyness that we all face. So that's just something that I do. I use it all the time. And hopefully it helps you. So as always, thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about quarter life clarity. And enjoy today's episode. So there's this book I'm reading called Fighting Shadows. And it's about overcoming 7 lies that keep men from becoming fully alive. So what I'm about to say applies to men, obviously. It applies to women. This isn't just a conversation for men that we're having today. But an excerpt from the book that I love, this chapter about loneliness. The author writes, I can't feel anything. I said this to my wife last year over a 10-minute morning coffee check-in at our kitchen island. I don't know what it is. I just feel dead inside. I don't feel joy, but I don't feel deep, aching sadness either. I just don't feel. It felt like a deep, deep fog was over my mind and spirit. And so he then explains how from the outside, externally, he was, had a great family, married, business was going great, but he still felt numb. And so that's when, at this conversation that he had with his wife asked him, when was the last time you felt genuinely full, alive, and joyful? Pretty good question. And so he thought about it for a second and immediately thought of college. This guy's, again, married, kids, business, and he thought of college and, he was 20, 22 years old. And he was like, why? Why college? And he was like, well, I had deep, life-giving friendships. I was in the trenches with 10 other guys that I was living with. We were sharing hearts. We were doing life together. And so I say that because, one, I think that's just a great question to ask yourself, but it leads us into the conversation that Megan and I are going to have today, just about friendship and losing touch. It's something that I've certainly felt of, yeah, man, when is the last time you felt genuinely full, alive, and joyful? And who were you with? What were you doing? And I think a lot of those times, if you answer that question, it's you point back to a time where you were with other people and you had great relationships. And so, just to also tie a bow on that thought, a message I got from one of my close friends recently to kind of summarize this whole introduction before we dive in. He messaged me and said, "I'm sad we all don't hang out like we used to. The youth and innocence was bliss, but I'm glad we're all big time adulting and grabbing life by the horns." And to me, I saw it, I was like, dude, like, appreciate it. Like, yeah, I feel the same way. So much of us feel the same way that, man, life's just hectic. It's busy. We've lost friends and it's hard. It's hard to maintain those relationships. So that's what we're talking about today. So Megan, that's probably the longest intro I've had without letting the guest speak, but why do you think this whole thing, this friendships, especially in your 20s, early 30s, is so important?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's because it has such a profound impact on our lives. Like, you hear it all the time. People say how, oh, the 5 people you spend the most time with are going to shape your life. And it's so true. Like, the people you surround yourself with really have a lot of power to shape your character and really the course of your life. Um, Conversely, the absence of those friendships, the absence of those people can also shape the course of your life in a way. And so I think that's something that is just, I don't know, we all wrestle with this idea of how we want to grow as individuals and how we want our lives to go. And one of the things that we should be looking at are our friendships because of the impact that it has.
Yeah, and I think just as we get older, we look, life happens, we leave college, all these things happen that we'll talk about today, but we just get lonelier as the years go by. I think it's harder to maintain those friendships because, kind of jumping ahead a little bit to what we're going to talk about, it's just we're not all in school together anymore. We're not all on sports teams. We're not all doing the same stuff and having the same goals. And it's hard. We're on different tracks. We're doing different stuffs. And I think everyone would probably agree that we, kind of like my buddy said, like we all want to hang out still. It's not personal. It's not like, yeah, man, I wish I didn't have friends. I wish I didn't have as many friends as I once had. Like, no one would say that. It's just it's happened and it's unfortunate. And just kind of piggybacking off of that, just a couple things to hit on why this is so important and loneliness. Also in the book Fighting Shadows, they talk about some studies on loneliness and just why this is so important. And just to quote the book, in one meta-analysis, which is like a study of studies, researchers found that data across over 300,000 individuals indicated that people with adequate social relationships have a 50% greater likelihood of survival compared to those with poor or insufficient social relationships. So, kind of a lot of big words there. Basically, if you have good friendships, they don't talk about quality really here, but friendships mean 50% greater chance of living longer. I don't know what survival necessarily means. Like, we're all going to die at some point, not to be morbid, but to piggyback off of that, another study, and I promise this is not going to be all studies that we're talking about today, but a Harvard study that started in 1934 and is still going on today, a 90-year study, also from Fighting Shadows. They combined a group of Harvard graduates and low-income teenage boys in Boston, and they followed them for their entire lives. And they measured a ton of stuff: DNA, psychological problems, marriages, deaths, a whole bunch of stuff. And they concluded that one specific thing, strong relationships, matter more than just about anything else in terms of the outcomes that we have in our lives, right? And how good our life eventually, or how good our life is emotionally, physical, spiritually. It's relationships. And I think just for a second, just think about that. It's not physical health. It's not how much you walk, how much you go to the gym. It's the people you surround yourself with. Just to your point on how important this stuff is, that's why we're talking about it. But the fact that we lose these the older we get, it's just, it all points towards why it's so important. And for the purpose of this conversation today, how we can just be more intentional about building and maintaining our friendships.
Yeah, I really like hearing the stats because I think that's something for me, and I think a lot of people can relate to. We feel that, like, we feel the difficulty of trying to maintain those relationships. We feel ourselves becoming more isolated, or at least I can. So seeing those statistics outside of ourselves, it's like, oh, it's not just me. And then it makes us think a little bit more critically about, okay, if this is such a pervasive problem, what do we do to address it?
Yeah, and I think for today, like, all this stuff is great, and we are going to get into like the how do we do this. But I think the research, the study is important to hit on just why this matters so much. And so I do want to dive into a Mel Robbins post that I recently found all about friendship in your 20s. It's a clip from a Jay Shetty podcast interview. I'll probably put a link to the post in the description of this episode because I do think it was great. But just to like summarize and kind of plagiarize probably what she talked about in that, and she hits on like why is building friendships, losing them, just relationships in your 20s, early 30s, why is it so hard? And she says, right up until you probably graduate college, high school, it's been a group sport. Friendship has been a group sport. We move through the same levels of life together, right? We're all just expected to be invited as a group together, do things together. We're in class together, teams, all that stuff. But then when we graduate, when we do turn 23 and we're out in the real world, it becomes an individual sport. We're no longer moving through life with another group of people. We're just, she calls it the great scattering of, physically and mentally, we're just doing different stuff. Some people are moving away. Some people are getting married and having kids. Some people moved home. We scatter. And so she goes on to say that there's 3 pillars about adult friendship, again, based on research. And to kick things off, like she says, when people come and go in your life, 99% of the time, 99% of the time, anytime you see that, I think you should pay attention. It's not personal. You haven't lost them as a friend. It's just that one of these 3 pillars is missing. And so just to run through those 3 pillars quick, number 1 is proximity, right? Who are you physically next to? Who's in front of you? If I'm hanging out with you all the time, Megan, we're probably going to be friends. And she actually threw in a example of, Megan, if you and I lived in a college dorm across the hall from together, 90% chance, again, a study, 90% chance that we'd be friends just because you're across the hall from me. But if you go 50 feet down the hall, it drops to 10% that we're going to be friends. 50 feet. That kind of scared me when I heard that, because it's like, I got friends that are states away. I got friends that are, 5 minutes away that I don't talk to anymore, right? And it's, who are you seeing in your day to day? Who are you around? You're probably going to be friends with them because you're just forced to see them all the time. So that's one thing. And just to also piggyback off of that, something she also says, to have a casual friend, you need to have spent 70 hours with them. To have a close friend, you need 200 hours. And that becomes a problem for us now because we're so busy. We're doing stuff. And who are we spending most of our time with? It's probably our coworkers, right? We're at work 8-10 hours a day. You spend a lot of time with those people that you work with. But why are we not friends with them? Which leads into point number 2 is we're on different timelines, different seasons, stages of life. You know, your coworker who's 40 with who's married and has kids, but you're 27 and single, you guys are probably not hanging out on Friday night because you're just at different points in your life. But when we were younger, to go back to that, we were all on the same timeline. We had the same goals. It was graduate, it was get the job, it was win the championship, all this stuff. Again, moving through life together. But now for us, like I said, we're on different timelines. Even the 25-year-old to the 25-year-old, different timelines. You could be married or you could be chasing your career. You could be living across the country. Who knows? And then the last thing, in terms of the 3 pillars to adult friendship, is energy. And energy in a sense of, to me, it's like, what are you doing? Right? The example she gives is if you decide not to drink or focus on fitness or have different political beliefs, religious beliefs, habits, things you do, the energy could be off if, say, Megan, you and I were drinking buddies for the longest time. And we had the same energy about that, right? But if I decide not to drink, the energy is going to be off. We might not be as close as we used to be, right? And it's those things too that I think, just again to wrap that up, and then Megan, I'll let you jump in here, but it's just, I think that's important to hit on before we really dive into this stuff of 3 pillars about adult friendship based on research. Again, proximity, what timeline, what stage of life you're in. On that too, it's just, I have a couple of close friends that are great friends with their coworkers too, to that point. And why is that? Well, it's because you have proximity, but you're also in the same season of life, right? And so I think that just kind of brings this whole friendship idea down to the ground a little bit. So Megan, take the ball and you talk now.
Yeah, I mean, all of that was so relatable. And shout out to Mel Robbins because she's awesome, has a lot of awesome thoughts. Yeah, it's totally easy to take for granted how much friendship was really kind of a passive activity for most of your time spent in school. You're just naturally with people who are in the same stage of life, similar age. So it's just easy to maintain those friendships. Then what happens when you graduate from high school, college, and there is the scattering, like she said? You have to be so much more intentional in order to maintain those friendships. So hopefully we can come up with something, or at least discuss a couple strategies and things that have been helpful for each of us that we can pay forward.
Yeah, and again, to go back to the beginning with that stat, like 99% of the time when you lose friends, lose touch with friends, it's not personal. It's just one of those 3 things that's happened. And I think that's really important because sometimes we do wonder why. We wonder why, man, that close friend that I had years ago, we did a whole lot together, XYZ. Why do we not have that anymore? And I think, honestly, I've thought about this myself with those friends that I've kind of lost touch with. It certainly is one of those 3 things. It's probably, if I'm being honest, at least 2 or maybe all 3 of them. And so now, like with all that being said, I do want to dive into more of just like the barriers that we face as quarter lifers, of what gets in the way of maintaining these relationships. Now that we know that. So Megan, like, to you, go wherever you want with this, but what are some of those barriers that you think you've felt in terms of the difficulties that come with sustaining, maintaining, even maybe making friendships?
Yeah, I mean, I think time is one of the big things that comes up. It's ironic because we have all this technology, and in theory, it should be easier than ever to stay connected to people because we can give anyone a call, a text, whatever, in a matter of seconds. And yet, somehow, it's so much harder to connect with people. And you really do have to make that space to have these deeper, more intentional conversations to really build relationships with people. But we have so much going on in our schedules and our lives that really makes it easy to put friendships and relationships on the back burner. And we don't mean it most of the time. I don't mean it, I know. Um, but if I'm not intentional about it and making it a priority, it just can fall by the wayside just behind a lot of other things. So I'd say that's one of the big things that comes to mind for me. That'd be number one anyway.
Yeah, and just it hits on just the message from my buddy. Like we're all just busy doing life, man. We're grabbing life by the horns. We're not in high school and college anymore when it was just like, all right, man, we're just having fun. Like this is great. Uh, and I think it does tie into to your point with just time. It ties into what we talked about with the busyness episode. Oh man, 5, I think. The busyness cure episode that we did a couple weeks ago of just yeah, man, we if we want these great relationships and realize that they are important and that we do need to invest in them, then we have to be able to say no to things like TV, like phones, just the sometimes pointless stuff that we spend our time on. It's the idea that if I'm saying yes to things like that maybe are just kind of dead time, so to speak, then does that mean I'm actually saying no to a friend? Could I be using that time to call a friend or send an encouraging text? It doesn't take a lot, but I think, over time we just get so I mean, I'm guilty of this, just one track mind. Like I do my day to day. I'm locked in on what I'm doing. And yeah, man, I'm probably not going to reach out to you. Now realizing that, it's like, well, you have to be intentional about this stuff. And it doesn't take a lot, as we'll talk about today. What about like I do want to talk about like the seasons of life, the different seasons of life that we're in, because I think that's another big part of this thing, on top of just the busyness and the time that we kind of just don't have as much of it anymore. That's a fact. Different seasons of life, different stages, different timelines, as Mel Robbins says. What are your thoughts on that? Like, how does that factor in? Maybe in kind of like your own experience too. Like, how have you seen that?
Yeah, I mean, I think once you get into your late 20s and mid 20s, 30s, there's such a variety of paths that someone can be on, and you start to experience that tension there. Now people are making job decisions that are taking them different parts of the country. People are building their own families. So you can feel that tension of, oh, okay, this friend is now having other responsibilities that pull them one direction, and you may be pulled in a different direction. And so, how do you contend for that relationship, or deciding whether or not you should be contending for that relationship, and whether or not that's a relationship to leave in the past is challenging. And sometimes, I know for me, even in your own hurt, you almost double down, or it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where you withdraw from a relationship out of fear of losing that friendship. But then as you do that, you're actually just making it happen. So trying to pause and really lean in those moments and try not to, you know, just draw back from the relationship out of self-protection. That's hard. That's definitely a tension that I've had to navigate. But I found that then when you come out the other side of that relationship, where you have two people contending to stay close and to continue to build from where you are, there's something really sacred about that. And it's totally worth it. It's hard work, but it's totally worth it in the end.
Yeah, I think just to your point, I mean, we're going to say this a bunch more. We're just being intentional at this point. Like we grew up kind of being passive about this stuff. Again, it was just we're doing the same stuff, man. We're in the same school. obviously we're going to be friends. We're hanging out all the time because we're forced to. And now we don't have that. And so just to your point about just being intentional, and I think this is kind of a tangent, but a conversation I had with my friends recently just kind of about this stuff is, man, in 5 years, 10 years for some of us, we're going to be at a different stage of our lives. We're going to be married with kids, probably most of us, right? And so we're not going to be able to do this as much anymore. It's just that realization that, shit, man, I'm 27 right now. And I think what's really cool about this era of the quarter lifer where most people are not necessarily married yet, not having the wife and kids, not at that next stage, it is really cool that we still get to, if we're intentional, hang out and kind of do dumb stuff at times and just kind of be that high school, college kid again in some ways, and just put all of our stuff aside. And yeah, we'll get together on Friday night. We don't have the kids running around and all that stuff because that's going to happen. And man, we're going to have more, like, less time than ever before. I have an older sister and my brother-in-law. They had recently had a kid, like a year old. And I see it. It's all their friends have kids now. It's like, man, how much do you get really hanging out with your friends anymore? It's like, I don't know, like once, twice, once every other month or something like that. It's like, man, that kind of sucks. Like, in a way, it sucks because of the friendship, but it's a great, you're replacing it in a sense with something fantastic as well. I'm not trying to shit on, having a wife and being married with kids, but yeah, it's just, I think it's a moment for appreciating where we're at, and just the fact that it's only going to get harder from here. And we need to be so intentional as the seasons of life just continue to change.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, we are finite beings. We only have so much time and resources and energy to give to different relationships. And as seasons change, we need to allocate those resources to different things. Um, and I think that's where the great scattering, as Mel Robbins put it, can be a potentially dangerous time, at least in terms of maintaining friendships, because it's the perfect time for comparison to really get in your head and really start to mess with you and make you question the path you're on. But to your point, I think something that's been helpful for me is just taking radical ownership of the resources that I have in this season. Like, my brother has 4 kids, and his resources are allocated towards them, and it's so beautiful. But at the same time, one of the great blessings of my own life, or that I can see in my own life, is that I don't have that. So I can allocate those resources, my time and energy, in other ways. So rather than falling into this trap that we have to be on the same page with all of our friends, doing the same things in order to maintain those relationships, it's like, how can I be the best version of myself and really just contribute to those relationships in the way that I can? And I think that's one path forward for each of us.
100%. On that note, this might be kind of messed up to say, but I think we have to pick and choose our friends at this point too. Like, I grew up with a lot of friends. Humble brag. I grew up with like a good amount of friends, like high school, throughout college, and man, I'm not as close as I used to be with them. Obviously, right? Everything that we're talking about, but at a certain point, especially personally speaking, the very, very important thing in my life right now is quarter life clarity, building something. I'm very career focused and driven right now. And because of that very large bucket that I have to tend to, that takes so much time, focus, energy, I've found myself somewhat having to pick and choose which ones that you cultivate. And that's a sad truth that I think a lot of us kind of face. I know I face it. But certain friends, just to go back to the proximity, the different seasons, the energy, I think about the ones that I have intentionally more like focused on as that circle has gotten smaller, it's because of one or more of those three things. Whether I'm close in proximity, whether we are in the same season of life, or we do have the same energy.
Yeah, I think it definitely can be hard, and I think there can be a grieving process there of transitioning from one stage of life or season of life to another one where we have to leave some things and some people behind. But I think on the other side, at least the positive reframe is okay, like, then what can I invest in? How can I invest more meaningfully in this smaller group of people and things that I have to tend to? So I try to keep that at the forefront of my mind so that I'm not wallowing too much in the past and the things I'm leaving behind.
I think it's quality over quantity now, right? It's yeah, man, I can't keep up all the time with 20 to 30 friends that I used to have. I have to focus harder on the 3, 4, 5, 8 people that I really want to invest in. And that's not to say that you, to kind of counteract my point, that's not to say that you just close off, you just cancel all the other numbers 9 through 30. Like that's not it. It's just less frequent. It's just because we are limited with our time and our resources. And so, again, just to, as we're working through this, okay, what are the barriers? What are the things that get in the way of us maintaining these friendships and building good friendships, right? Just the different seasons of life, different timelines, less time than we had before, like not the same goals. We're not working through life together. We have different checkpoints, different things that we're focusing on. What else comes to mind for you in terms of just those barriers, those things that get in the way?
Yeah. I mean, I think our own fears and insecurities, I think it's hard to be vulnerable. And part of building relationships, you have to be open. And I think any particular insecurity or fear can really dampen our ability to be open with people. I had a situation a couple of years ago where I was talking to someone that I knew peripherally for years, and they're asking me to tell them a story about something. And I was like, I don't know. I think I'm pretty much an open book. And they were like, no, you're not. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just got totally called out. And I was reflecting on that, and they were totally right, you know. One, I tend to be a little bit more quiet and shy and don't always share. And that's not a bad thing. Like, we're allowed to be shy and keep certain details to ourselves. But in addition to that, if I'm being honest with myself, so much of that is driven from pride or my own ego or fear of what people think of me, and not wanting them to think less of me because of X, Y, and Z. And so, I don't know, that moment really convicted me in many ways. Like, I know we've talked about this, like, our faith is super important to us. And when I think about Jesus and who he is, Jesus doesn't love us in that way. Like, he comes towards us no matter what and seeks us out no matter what and pursues us no matter what. Even when we turn our backs to him, you know, he doesn't wait for, okay, when you prove yourself to me, then I'll take care of you, you know, and that's more in line with the person that I want to be. And I know no one can do it perfectly, and we all need tons of grace in order to achieve that. But more and more, I want to be that person who, like, okay, like, I'm going to put myself out there and I'm going to care for this person regardless of how they receive me. And yeah, so that's my long winded answer to insecurities, fear, ego, pride. All those things can be another barrier to maintaining good friendships.
Yeah. Well, and credit to you too, because I think you do a great job of knowing you for the past, I mean, only like 6 months or so. Like, I think you do a very good job of putting yourself out there, asking plenty of questions.
Too many
Um,
questions, probably, at times, but that's okay.
no, but to your point, just like it's insecurities. I think our hearts over time get hardened. The lonelier we get, the less relationships and close friendships that we do have. it's the fact that, oh man, that friend didn't reach out on my birthday. So like screw them, kind of like we just feel awful about that, and we're hurt by it. And so it's like, oh man, like what does that mean? And we kind of look too far into it. But just to tie in the Mel Robbins thing again, 99% of the time it's not personal. They just forgot. And like to your point about Jesus and having grace for each other, it that needs to be okay. It's I think it's hard to be this age. It's hard. We got so much going on, and you know what, man, I forgot, and I'm sorry, and that happens. But it's having that grace for your friends. It's also just the similar kind of idea. I think it's a good one because I feel like it's one that most people have felt. But when you hold the door for someone and they don't say thank you, it's like, man, like what is wrong with you? Like what? But I think the way I've dealt with that myself, that specific situation, I think it does tie into friends. I'll bring it back. But it's realizing that I just did the right thing. Holding the door, I know in my head that that was 1000% the right thing to do. So, okay, the next time, am I not going to hold the door for someone because of that one experience that, by the way, they were probably just either just forgot, were thinking about something else. Maybe they're dealing with something very serious that they're just overwhelmed with stuff. Like, you just don't know. Or maybe they are an asshole or something. like, but again, who cares? To quote Ted Lasso, which I am watching right now, again, it's freaking greatest show in the world. Doing the right thing is never the wrong thing. And so tying that back into friends, I think, and your point just about fear and insecurity, we have to be willing to, I don't want to say get hurt, but like get rejected sometimes and be let down by our friends. Uh, and just the idea that, we think it needs to be a two-way street. Like, man, they haven't reached out in months, so I'm not going to reach out. And that's just, I think that's the essence and the core of kind of what is wrong. And the hard part about all this is we think that way, and it's just like, that's not true. That's not right. That's not good. And that's why I like how you brought it back to Jesus. Like, whether you're a Christian or not, Jesus, if you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the perfect example of how you should treat people, no matter what. And I think we should and we can look at him as that perfect example for how we should not just treat our friends, but treat everyone. It's loving others, loving your neighbor as yourself. Like, that's what we're supposed to do. But I think those insecurities absolutely do get in the way, and over time they just stack up and stack up and stack up year over year, and that's where you do eventually become numb. You have that hard heart. You're not going to reach out. You get lonelier and lonelier, and over time it's just like you get to that point where the author of Fighting Shadows is just at the island with his wife, and it's just like, what the hell's going on, man? I don't feel alive. I'm just numb. I can't even feel anymore. And so that's why we're having this whole conversation. But the insecurities part, I think, is a huge one.
Yeah. I think as humans, we all just have that deep ache in our hearts to be seen, to be known, to be loved. And whenever you're thinking about building relationships with someone, there is a real risk of rejection, which is scary because we don't want to be rejected. I had a situation not too long ago, or a couple months ago. I sent a text to a friend. I don't know, I felt like they needed some encouragement, so I put it out there. And they didn't respond, which wasn't out of character. Yeah. Wasn't out of character for this person, but that's fine. All right. All right. Dust yourself off. Like, it's fine.
Doing the
it's
right
fine.
thing is never the wrong thing. You know it's the right thing.
Yes. And months later, which was now a couple weeks ago, I reconnected with this person, and I totally forgot about that text. Didn't even remember I sent it. But they said oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I didn't respond. Like, you don't understand how much that meant to me. Like, someone knew I needed to hear that. And I'm sorry. I was just so overwhelmed that by that message that I didn't respond. And it's like, oh my gosh. Like, oh, you're so welcome. Don't apologize. And it was just a good reminder that the outcome, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. Um, you're never, or in my case, you're probably never going to regret saying something kind to someone. So I think it's a risk that's worth taking when it comes to encouraging others and connecting with others in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and as we're just sitting here, I'm trying to just think about those people that I've I've just lost friendships, or we're just not as close. I don't want to say lost friendships because what we're talking about, 99% of the time you haven't lost them. It's just things happen. And I feel like it really does all point back to one of these three things. Proximity, we're just not near each other anymore. We're not seeing each other. We're on different timelines. You're married and having kids, and I'm focusing on my career, stuff like that. Or the energy is just not there. Like, we have different goals, habits, things that we're focusing on. I think, honestly, seriously, as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about that, and I think it all does point back to that. And so, just to kind of tie a bow on everything that we've talked about, right? Of just these hurdles that we face as quarter lifers with maintaining friendships and cultivating real friendships. It's those things. It's the time. We don't have as many resources as we used to. We don't have as much time to hang out all weekend. Uh, and we have those insecurities too, to your point, of just like the fear of rejection, all that stuff, and they're real barriers that we all face. And so I kind of want to move on now to, all right, with all that being said, all the stuff that gets in the way, how do we do it now? Anything else, that you can think of kind of in your experience based on just like, all right, what are the barriers, stuff that gets in the way of these friendships?
Yeah, I mean, just as you were listing off the three pillars again, I was reflecting on the fact that, when you think about proximity, that's more of an external issue. It's a physical issue that we experience. But when it comes to the energy piece, like that is much more internal. And that's something that I don't know, I feel like we didn't talk about as much when it comes to loneliness, is it's not just physical. It's not just about not having people around you. A lot of times loneliness is largely internal. You could be in a group of people, you could be surrounded by a million faces and still feel lonely, still feel like the people here don't know you or don't understand you. And so when we think about how do we contend for relationships, I think we have to address the internal piece, like that particular insecurity. And so we're thinking about external means of improving relationships, but also internal means, like doing the work to grow in our own personal health so that we can be relational with other people.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's a great point because I kind of relate to that of just being around people but still being lonely. And it's like, why? Well, the energy. And energy is such a big word. You could like fit a lot underneath that. But it really is, that's the best way to put it to me. It's that energy. It's that lack of connection that we just feel towards a person. And I do think, to your point, it oftentimes is probably us, but it's probably a mix of internal and potentially external, of just the energy is off, maybe because we are on different paths, different timelines, different seasons of life right now. But yeah, I think taking that ownership ourselves of being able to initiate friendships and remove that internal insecurity that we do have, 100% agree. So with all that being said, now that we got through like the problems, what we struggle with, Now it's like, all right, dude, great. How do we fix it? What do we do about it? Quick interruption before we get into the second half of this episode. If you're enjoying this episode and you found it valuable so far, my one ask is that you share it with a friend. The only way that Quarter Life Clarity reaches more people is if people like you share it with someone. And I know when we send our friends podcasts, it feels like we're giving them work. I know I felt that, and honestly, you kind of are giving them work. Um, but if it's valuable to you, maybe it'll be valuable to them. And so I always like to say, hey, I know you probably don't have time for this, but I think you might like it. And if you can't listen to it, that's fine. But just wanted to share. That's all it needs to be. And if you don't find this episode valuable, then obviously don't send it to a friend. You don't have to. Just ignore everything I just said and go enjoy the rest of the episode. And so in Fighting Shadows in the book, they actually talk about 3 key things that determine the quality, the depth of relationships. And those 3 things are proximity, unplanned interactions, and vulnerability. So Megan, for you, how have you, with your friends, increased proximity? The amount of times that I see you, that you hang out with your friends, that we're face to face or just hanging out together, how can we do a better job of that?
Yeah, calendar. Big fan of using my calendar. I think one of the superpowers for me of being an introvert is I found that when I actually plan the interaction, then I can set it up so that, you know, it's on a day that I'll have energy for it. It's at a time that I'll have energy for it. So using my calendar, looking ahead and saying, okay, when can I meet up with this person? And putting that in my calendar and blocking it in advance. If you want to get really strategic with it, you can lump a couple of interactions together so that you can be extra productive. But planning it ahead is essential for me because if I don't plan it ahead, it's not going to happen. So that's probably strategy number 1. This kind of touches into the unplanned interactions. One of my favorite things to do is to take a friend along on something that I was going to do anyway. So one of my best friends, she'll text me like, hey, do you need to go to Costco this weekend? I'm like, no, but I'll go anyway. So you've got the car ride there, you've got walking around Costco and dodging all the carts and fending for your life while you're in there. And then you get the drive home, you get stuck in traffic on the post road. So it's a great time to connect and have a little bit of quality time. And, it's something that maybe you were doing anyway, or doesn't have to be this big sacrifice. You don't have to plan this extravagant get together, but just bringing a friend along for that, I find, is a great way to increase proximity.
I think because to go back to just the fact that we have less time, everyone's busy. I think it's just being so intentional about putting things on the calendar, saying, hey, we're doing this at this date, just to go back to that of what you said about putting things down and planning them in advance so that, hey guys, we know we're hanging out on this day. Like we're golfing on July 22nd. Like clear your schedule. And so I think that is super important. And it kind of goes against maybe a lot of what we grew up doing, right? It was just like, it's Friday. Hey, what are you guys doing tonight? Like, nothing, man. Obviously, like we hang out all the time. I'm not doing anything. And so it's just different now. And I think that's something. I also think too, I mean, quick like story, a friend of mine, a high school friend of mine that I haven't seen in probably like 10 years since high school. We randomly saw each other a couple times recently, and did the classic, hey, we should get together. And in the back of my head, I'm just like, there's no way we're going to do this. But yeah, I'll play the game and do this. And I forget, I think he texted me about it. I was like, hey man, like, you want to actually get together? And I was like, yeah, like, sure. Like, let's do it. And we did, we got dinner and it was one of the best conversations I had had in so long. And where does that tie in? Well, I think it's also, we'll talk about the vulnerability piece, which was a big part of why that conversation was great. But I think it's just not being afraid to initiate the hangout, right? And they talk about that in the book of initiating the hang. Like, I do think there is a weird cost benefit analysis that we do with our friends of like, you know what, man, this is not going to be that good. Like, I don't want to hang out, dude. I haven't seen you in so long. We got so much to catch up on. I don't want to tell you about what's going on in my life. I don't really care about what you got going on, respectfully. I don't have time. There's all these things that we've already talked about, but I guess why I tell that story is you just don't know. And as we'll talk about, I think just the honesty and vulnerability, like we both realized that we both went through similar stuff since the last time we saw each other, post college, just everything that the post college era brings. And like I said, it was such a great conversation, but you don't have that conversation. You don't maybe gain that friend back unless you're willing to say yes and kind of risk it maybe falling flat. But then it's being, when you're there, it's being honest, being a little vulnerable, and being willing to go there and have that deeper conversation that I at least went into that situation knowing I wanted to have. But it is a two-way street in that sense of like, it's the energy thing. If the energy was off, it's like, oh man, I don't know if I really want to go there. But yeah, that's just one story that I think in terms of, right, increasing proximity, it's saying yes and not being afraid to recultivate and reach out to those friends that maybe you haven't seen in a while. They probably want to hang out too.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I mean, I think being vulnerable, as we said before, is an essential part of connecting with people. And I was just actually having a lunch with two of my closest friends, and I was asking them, like, hey, give me some like insights so that I can talk about on this podcast. And, what sort of traits do you like in your friends, or what sort of things do you tend to gravitate towards in other people? And it was really interesting because she said, well, authenticity, which I think a lot of people can relate to, just, and part of that is being vulnerable, right? Like when you are authentic with people, you're going to have to show some of the sides of yourself that maybe you'd prefer not to show. That's one huge part of connecting with people. And I think people are drawn to that, ironically, like the things we want to hide, or our natural impulse is to want to hide so many things about our life. But actually, people will be drawn closer to you, or many people will be drawn closer to you when you are open with those struggles, because we all have them. We all have the things that we're not super proud of or we don't want to put at the forefront. So that really ushers in connection, is when you can be open in exposing those things. And the other thing she said was just a readiness to go there, like go where the conversation is going, not going into these interactions with a specific agenda and like, oh, we have to hit these beats and this is how this interaction is going to go. Just being willing to, yeah, just go where the conversation is going. And in that, I think you can find really meaningful connection. So,
No, that's awesome. And I think just to bring it back to proximity, right? How can we, because we focus on the people that are in front of us. So basically what we're saying is we need to be more intentional about getting people in front of us and who we have in front of us. And it's not going to be as much as it used to be. We have to be okay with that. But yeah, I really do think it's, man, just being intentional, reaching out, putting it on the calendar, planning things. I mean, especially the people that are states away. I mean, I got a friend in Colorado. I got a friend, friends all over the place. A lot of them, like my college friends, are like, they're all over the place. And it's like planning the trip too. It's doing those things. I think some things, having like a yearly trip with your buddies, like I do that with a group of my friends, and it's awesome. And I honestly, for a couple of years there, that was the only time I saw them. But like having those things, those staples, I think making it somewhat of a ritual, I think, is also good, that you know certain things are on the schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I think for proximity, one of the biggest things is you gotta put yourself out there, you know,
Yeah.
as much as life has become so comfortable, it's so easy to go home and just curl up on the couch and put on a show or listen to music. And I love doing those things. It's not a bad thing, but sometimes I gotta get off my butt and get out and hang out with people. And um, one, going back to the calendar, planning that in advance so that I don't have the opportunity to go home and get super cozy. That makes it easier to get out there. And um, even to your intro, what you're saying about how so many of the moments that we experience the most joy are when we're connecting with other people. So reminding myself of that preemptively before I'm exhausted after a long work week and I just want to stay in, being reminded of the joy that comes from connecting with people and using that to propel me forward and make those plans and get something on the calendar.
No, I love that, and I think it's also it's hanging out with the right people too, that do kind of fill your cup, because if you're just hanging out with people that always drain you, it's like, well, over time you are going to stop hanging out with them, or you're just like really sacrificing a lot of your own kind of mental sanity. But I think to your point, I feel that 100% after a long work week, long day. Trust me, like, my form of relaxation is sitting on the couch and watching a movie or a TV show like by myself and just doing nothing, like turning my brain off. My brain's always like on. And it's like, especially as more of an introverted person, I have a limited social battery. Like I there's plenty of times where I'm just like, I don't wanna hang out with people. I don't want to do it. But then to go back to earlier, you see the stats on loneliness. You see how important it is. That's why we talk about it. That's why we're bringing this up. Like, that's just as much of a message for me as it is for anyone listening to this. Like, I need this plenty, and that's why we're talking about it. But yeah, I think it's those, it's all connected, the calendar, all this stuff, but like almost forcing yourself to do it, because to go back to that dinner, it we both said it was one of those things that we're like kind of just like, how's this gonna go? Another buddy that I recently kind of met, you know, just asked him out for lunch, for coffee, and you know, it both of those instances were like, we kind of talked about it. It's like, we didn't think it was going to be this good of a conversation, but leading into it, it's like, man, there's probably a good amount of things I'd rather do instead. But coming out the other side, it's realizing, wow, okay, I really needed that. And I think, especially when you're doing it with the right people that have that same energy, that are willing to go there, that are probably on the same timeline as you, uh, they really can fill your cup in a way that you cannot do just sitting on the couch watching TV, doing it on your own. I'm not saying there's a time and place for both, I think, but both are, I think, critical, at least in my life.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You totally have to take a moment, or I think it's valuable to take a moment and reflect on who in your life really fill your cup. You know, what interactions do you walk away from saying like, wow, I feel refreshed, I feel encouraged, I feel like a better version of myself coming away from that interaction, and what people in your life, I hate to say it, but tend to drain your energy a little bit more, who maybe take a little bit more than they give. And that doesn't mean you have to be harsh about it, because we've all had those days where we're not the most encouraging or best version of ourselves. And so we have to have grace for that too. But if there's a pattern that you're seeing in certain interactions where the relationship is draining more from you than it's giving, then maybe that's a time to use your own discernment and say, hey, maybe I need to step back from this interaction so that I can conserve my energy for other relationships that are a little bit more life-giving.
Yeah, so let's move on to unplanned interactions, which is like a weird one, by the way. Unplanned interactions, like you said, kind of, texting a friend, hey, I'm on the way to Costco, or I'm going to go to Costco in 30 minutes. Do you want to come? And we don't have to get into all the details of why that's so like important, that why that's one of the three things that contributes to deep, good relationships. Uh, this is one that we're just gonna trust the research. I didn't do the research. I read it in a book, and I'm gonna trust the guy. But if you really think about it, like I've thought about it since reading that, it's like, there's a buddy that I went to high school that I recently saw at the gym, and we started going at the same time, and you see him at 7:30 in the morning, and it does do a weird, like, puts a little pep in your step just to see a familiar face, and it's someone that I hadn't connected with, seen in a while. It also doesn't have to be like we're telling our life stories. It's just, hey man, good to see you, like we catch up and all that stuff. But I think another good one, at least for me in terms of unplanned interactions, is just sending a text to people. Sending the encouraging text of, hey man, thinking about you, like, hope you're doing good, hope you have a great day today. It doesn't need to be, hey, let's get together for beers, let's hang out, let's do all this stuff, because I know you don't have time. I don't really have time either. I just don't want to lose you as a friend, and I think that can be okay. But the unplanned part of it, like, think about if you got that text from that friend that you haven't talked to in a month, 6 months, 5 years. If they sent that unplanned text, it's like, how would that make you feel? And so I think it would make you feel great. And so I say all that to kind of, I guess, give a little bit more of my own personal proof to this whole idea of the importance of unplanned interactions.
Yeah. I think to your point, that's definitely an area where technology is our friend. I totally agree. Like that quick text of encouragement to someone, or phone call, or voice message, or Marco Polo, Snapchat, whatever you want to use, whichever platform
Marco
floats
Polo?
Yeah. Have you heard of it?
No.
I literally just downloaded it like 2 weeks ago. One of my good friends who, she lives down in Texas now, she told us about it. I guess you can send these little videos. It's kind of like Snapchat, but I don't know if Snapchat and Instagram Reels had a baby.
So it's like videos?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. It's different, but it's fun.
Yeah.
And a good way to stay in touch. So yeah, technology, definitely our friend in that realm. I think the other piece of it is, which overlaps a little bit with proximity, but is just putting yourself out there. Like, in order to run into someone in an unplanned interaction, you're probably going to have a little more success if you're not in your home, and not in your room. So just going outside and go for a walk. I mean, there are times where I could even be going out for a walk and run into one of my neighbors who I barely know, but you just have a nice interaction. You get to pet their dog, and it's the best, It's such an encouragement, and it just lifts your spirits a little bit. So yeah, physically just putting yourself outside of your home can be one really good strategy to have those unplanned interactions with people.
Yeah, it's a hard one. It's a weird one, because kind of what we're saying is, like, planning unplanned things. Like, how are we supposed to do that? I 100% agree. Like, just putting yourself out there. For me, in the back of my mind, I'm also like, I'm not gonna do that, in a sense of just like, because I'm so, and I mean that in the best way possible. And I'll bring it back to what I said earlier, but it's just the daily rituals and my daily things, again, business, what I'm doing, so important. I don't know, like, I don't know if I'm not going to change my routine. You know what I mean? But I do, you might disagree with that, but
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, as I totally relate to having a schedule, totally. Like every day, I'm one of those people who, even on a day off, even on vacation, I kind of know from the start of the day to the end of the day, like, okay, I want to do this at this time, this at this time. So for me to get ahead of that is I try to schedule in unscheduled time. So I try to schedule space to be interrupted, to run into people because I know like I like my schedule too. So I think it's really helpful to schedule unscheduled interactions, if
So
that
what
makes
do you?
sense.
No, I like it. What do you? What can that mean? Like you mentioned, taking a walk. Does it mean going to fill in the blank? Like, is there anything more? Can you get any more specific in terms of just examples of that? Because I think you're onto something potentially.
Yeah. I mean, I think even just I don't know, it could be lingering places, getting to work a little bit earlier, staying a little bit later so that I have margin to be interrupted. So that, hey, if a coworker wants to chit chat for a moment and we can connect, that I have space for that without me becoming anxious and frazzled because, oh my gosh, it's 10:25 and I'm supposed to be doing this at this exact time, so just building it in a little bit, lingering in spaces without that sounding totally creepy, just like lurking in different spaces. Um, but yeah, just spending a little bit more time in different areas where people are coming through so that I can be interrupted. I don't know if
No,
that
that
makes
makes
it
a
any
ton of
more.
sense because I mean, look, my schedule is probably a lot different than most. Like, I don't go to work. And so immediately when you said that, I thought of like eating lunch in the cafeteria versus at your desk. Like, I come from a, corporate, like, cubicle office setting. And so, yeah, like, just, yeah, put yourself in the setting. And this ties into proximity, right? Of where you could have those unplanned things happen. I think about like after church on Sunday, just like hanging out a little bit longer. You don't know what the conversation is going to be, who you might talk to. Just yeah, like lurking. I think is kind of a good way to put it. Um, thank you for jumping in there, but for me, like the main thing, and actually something that I've been very intentional about lately. I actually set a reminder to go off at like 8 a.m., 9 a.m. every day that says text a friend. And it's such an easy thing to do. Like I said, all it needs to be is, hey, like, was just thinking about you. And just like for a second, think about that friend that maybe you haven't talked to in a while or you talked to recently. And whoever pops in your head, just run with it, and send them that encouraging text like, hey, just hope you have a great day today. And I think what makes me do that is thinking about if roles were reversed and I got that text, I'm not going to be upset about it, right? Especially if it's someone that I haven't talked to in a while, right? And I think we lose some of that. We lose some of that. I've lost some of that in the day to day. That's why I am being intentional about it. Uh, and it's just another way to not lose those friends, especially the ones that are kind of, I don't want to say on their way out, but you guys just don't talk as much anymore. And it's kickstarting a little bit of that fire again. At least to say, you know what, man, I know we're busy. Again, I don't have to tell you my whole life story. You don't have to tell you mine. We don't have to say we're getting beers. I'm just letting you know that I'm here and that I haven't left and that the fact that we haven't talked isn't personal. We're just busy and I miss you. And obviously you're not saying all that stuff, but I think the impact that something so small that can take you 15 seconds to do is so valuable. And another thing off of that, just with the whole technology and texting and stuff, that piece, it's calling people when you're driving. Uh, it's not being. I think we need to leave more voicemails to people. Who doesn't love listening to a voicemail? Sending a voice message. I've said that a couple times. Just make going the extra mile. Send a video. I've kind of do that. I'm sure people think it's weird, but then you actually get it and you open it and you listen to it. And it's like probably makes you feel pretty good. It's that extra step of connection. I think just always trying to go above and beyond is important and to go back to I think just calling people on their drive piece. I know personally, I hesitate there. It's like I have a notes list in my phone of people that I should call and that I want to call. And then I get in the car and I have an hour drive and it's like, you know what? Like, I'd love to listen to music right now. They're probably busy. What are we going to talk about? We haven't talked in a long time. You start to just have all those doubts, those insecurities come in, and I think it's just realizing that at the end of the day, it doesn't need to be this whole life story thing. It's just it can be quick. I think we need to normalize quicker phone calls and that it's not like work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes me think of a couple of things. Um, for people who maybe work remotely or maybe are physically, in a space where they're not interacting with as many people, I think to your point, the phone call and technology is, again, such a great resource there. And so maybe it could look like for the unplanned interaction, scheduling time, like you've done in your day, to send yourself a reminder at a particular time of your day or commute, to reach out to other people. That's a really great unplanned interaction. And then the other piece of that is just you got to kind of shoot your shot sometimes. You got to go for it and see where it lands because you never know where it'll end up.
All right, let's move on to the third piece of how can we cultivate deeper relationships, which is vulnerability. Gone through proximity, unplanned interactions. And I want to just say this quote real quick. Timothy Leary, that says, every time you say club passwords like have a nice day and weather's awful today, eh? You yearn inside to say forbidden things like tell me something that makes you cry or what do you think deja vu is for? And why I like that quote is I personally resonate with it. I've said on here a few times that I hate and I am bad at surface level conversations. I mean, it's like why I'm doing this podcast is to have deeper conversations. I just love them. I think about this stuff all the time. And so I think bad at having surface level conversations. I'm okay with that though. But I think we check down to that. It's the cliche of, "Hey, how you doing? Good. You good? Good. All right. Later." Like you better not say you're like not doing good cuz I don't have the time. And so, I think the vulnerability piece is so important. To me, it's the most important part of this whole the three pieces. Uh and to go back to the conversation with my buddy that I hadn't seen in 10 years and why that dinner was so great. It was, yes, it was because we did it and we got face to face, but it was because we were both willing to go deeper than normal, I guess you'd say. We were both willing to share our struggles from the past and what we've been through and all this stuff and be a little bit vulnerable. And so, Megan, to toss the ball back to you, how in your experiences in your life, how have you been able to be more vulnerable slash advice for how we can be more vulnerable with each other?
Yeah, one of the things that comes to mind is it connects back to the story I told before about how I thought I was an open book, but apparently I wasn't being perceived that way. Is like you, I love having deep conversations with people. Small talk is super challenging and super awkward for me. So I just, even in that particular circumstance where that person didn't feel like I was super vulnerable or open, I was waiting for someone to ask me a meaningful question. I was ready to answer if someone asked me something really personal or deep. I was ready to go there, but I was just too passive. I was waiting for other people to ask me the question. So one strategy that I have used is I try to ask people the questions that I want to be asked. Little Jedi mind trick there, but it's helpful because one, it allows other people to open up a little bit more, but it also sets you up perfectly for someone to say, what about you? And it force you like just to open that door and be a little bit more vulnerable. One of the things I'm thankful for with my job as a physical therapist is I spend so much time asking people about how they feel. Like, how did this exercise make you feel? Was it, what type of pain was it? And over time, it gave me a lot of practice and just asking better questions, you know, like if you just say, how do you feel? And they say, good, or ow, my back hurts. That's very little to go on and it's not super useful. Like, I can't help you with that information. But if we get better at asking good questions, then we're able to really serve each other in that way, if that makes sense.
No, that makes all the sense. And Megan loves asking the 1 to 10 question. 1 to 10, how good, that's what I got to ask before we sat down to record. 1 to 10, how's your day going? 1 to 10, how stressed are you? And I realize you say that because you probably ask your patients 1 to 10, how painful is that?
I do.
Or what's the pain level? Makes all the sense in the world. But anyways.
It's important to quantify it, right? Because like
Yeah.
you said, those open-ended questions are intimidating and it's the perfect just opener to I'm good, or just giving a very general surface level question. So asking deeper follow-up questions can really give you some more meaningful information there. So it's a lot of reps. It's been a learned skill for me that I'm still trying to figure out, but it's been cool because I've been able to use that outside of work as well to connect with people. And the other piece of that is using wisdom, like taking that moment to reflect on yourself. If you're the person who maybe has a little bit more difficulty opening up, or you find you go away from conversations feeling like you didn't really share, maybe that's your opportunity to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to share 1 or 2 more details than I would normally. And I've used this for myself. Like, okay, I'm going to say 1 or 2 more things than I would. And I found that in that, it's really opened doors for people to then ask follow-up questions, or them just feel a little bit more connected to you because they know a few more details. Then on the other side of that, if you're going away from conversations feeling like, wow, I didn't really get much information out of them, or I feel like I did all the talking, maybe that's an invitation to ask 1 or 2 more questions of the other person. So I find that that's one way to usher in a little more vulnerability in our interactions.
I don't think anyone would say that they dislike being asked about themselves. Like, really asked about themselves. You know what I mean? Like a good question, not just like, hey, what's up, man? Like, how's the weather? That's what we don't want. But it's like that genuine, and the words can be the same, how you doing? But it's how you say it, I think, is super important too, of just, hey, like, how you doing? Like, how you actually doing? And so that's just something. But for you, because I know you're good at asking questions, as you just kind of said, is there any like specific questions that you ask that you could share with people, of just examples of better questions?
That's funny. We were just joking about this. With work, I constantly ask people, like, okay, what are we working with pain wise? 0 to 10. If 10's taking me to the hospital, 0 is nothing. How much pain did you have? So I've really utilized that one with a lot of my friends. Like, how was your week? Okay, 0 to 10. How good was your week? And that starts getting a little bit deeper. Like, you can't just say, oh, it was good, or it was fine. It was busy. But if you say, like, oh, my week was good. Yeah, it was kind of an 8. Oh, 8's pretty good. Why was it an 8? 8's great, at least in this scale. Of course, for pain, I said it was the reverse. So let's flip the scale there. But it forces people to go a little deeper. So I think just questions that open that up, and even just asking the follow-up question. Oftentimes, that's the best question you can ask someone. You know, say more. Tell me more about that. Because it just demonstrates you care. I guess that's one of the important details there too. Like, when you really care, or if there's information you want to know about someone, you will ask the follow-up question. And I think people can sense that. Like, if you're just engaging in small talk, and this is probably why we don't like small talk, is because are you really listening? Do you really care about the answer? Do you really care about, like, oh, was it a fun week for you? Yes or no? Like, uh, okay, that's great, but I think when you are able to ask more detailed questions, that signals that you are listening to someone and you do care about them. And I think we all pick up on that, and then we're more likely to share when we find that the other person is really listening because they care and are digging deeper because they care. I don't know. Was any of that
No, I
useful?
think no, it was very useful. I really do think the 1 to 10 question, and not just like how was your week, but how stressed are you is one that you asked me. Like 1 to 10, anything. How do you feel right now? Like how's your day? 1 to 10, all that stuff. It does just take it to the next level, and it's also not a super uh like aggressive question. It's still pretty surface level, but then it creates room for a little bit more depth. And then you ask, like, yeah, why? Why was it an 8? Or, oh man, it was a 4? Like, why was it a 4? And yeah, to your point about the follow up questions, it's in Fighting Shadows, they talk about this. It's just what else? Yeah, what else? You know, especially when I think you are having like a deeper conversation. To your point about earlier, we do want to go deeper and share, especially with our friends, a little bit more. I've felt that plenty. And it's like those questions that we want to be asked, like, yeah, what else? Oh, you actually want to hear more about this? Oh, that makes me feel good. So yeah, I'm gonna share. I think too, just on the question asking, like everything you talked about too, it is a two-way street. Like you got to be a good listener too, in all of this. But even just random questions of like, what's your favorite movie? Like it can still be surface level, but it's just different. It gives a different vibe. It creates more of a conversation. What was your favorite song in middle school? Or I mean the one like in the quote, what do you think deja vu is for? Like just weird stuff like that. Tell me something that makes you cry. Like that's deeper. Something a question I thought of uh is like what's something you're proud of slash or something that makes you happy that nobody knows about, that that's just kind of one of those secrets with yourself. uh that's a question that I've just kind of felt myself. But yeah, I think a big part of it is asking questions.
Yeah, and being genuinely curious about the answer. I guess that's maybe the one of the key components of being a good question asker is genuinely being curious about other people. Like I'll give my brother a shout out. He's pretty good at asking like those silly questions, and it's one of those things that sometimes the questions that come out of his mouth we go like, oh, that was really interesting. Like I don't know how I feel about that. But it's because he's genuinely curious about people, and I think other people respond well to that because they sense, oh, here's this person who actually wants to know about me or wants to get to know me. And I think that's just a great way to open the door to vulnerability.
And something that I love to say, and maybe I'll just say it on every single episode from here on out, is we're all the same, but we're all different. And as we are kind of getting ready for this episode, I thought about that more because I haven't explained really what that means. And I realized that I think it means on the outside, like we talked about earlier, we're all in different seasons, we're all doing different stuff. We've got different goals now. The great scattering has happened. And externally, a lot of our lives are very different now, which was not what we grew up with. And that's how I think we're all different. Not to mention just we're all unique individuals, our personalities and all that. But why I think we're all the same is actually on the inside. So we're different on the outside, but I think we're all very much the same on the inside because we all do fundamentally, I think, crave depth. We crave someone to ask us truly, how are you doing? And especially when it comes from a close friend, it just means a lot. Especially when, look, man, we're all dealing with stuff. Everyone's going through something. And when you get asked those questions that hit home with you based on kind of what you're going through, I think, it does make you feel like seen. And you realize also, just to go back to we're all the same, we're all different, but we're all the same. It's like that text. It's the same. It's if you got a text right now from a friend that you haven't seen, a close friend that you haven't seen or talked to much in a year, 2 years, how would that make you feel? You'd probably be like pretty pumped, right? And again, just like, hey man, thinking about you, have a great day. And so it's like, do that more. Like, don't overcomplicate it. I think on the inside, especially like quarter lifer to quarter lifer, this stuff all gets taken to the next level because, again, we're all going through different stuff, but internally, this is the whole root of quarter life clarity. We all know it's a shit show. We all know it's chaos. We all don't know what to do and are struggling in a million different ways. And internally we feel it, but externally we don't know how to say it and we don't know how to deal with it. And we go about our like automatic existences thinking that I'm the only one that feels this and is going through something. And you know, Megan, I don't want to burden you by talking about it. And it's again, it's to tie it back to what we're talking about. It's the vulnerability, realizing that especially your close friends, your friends, you should be able to go to those places with them. And I think what's at risk is if you don't, your friendship can be at risk because I've felt the older you get, the more depth you crave. That's been my personal experience. And so if you're just staying on the surface, your friendship, your relationship with those people that you're staying on the surface with is in jeopardy. And so I think we need to be willing to go there and ask the questions and realize that we're all the same on the inside, but it does look different on the outside a lot of the time.
Yeah, that was such a good point. And something that I think about a lot is in life, there's so many incredible, joyful, awesome things that happen in life, but I think we also know and have experienced that at its best, life is extremely hard, and at its worst, it is just downright cruel. And so the people you have in your corner, the people you are surrounded by, the people that you can support and you can encourage and walk through life with can have such a tremendous impact on your experience and really lift each other up. Like we are called, as Jesus would call us, as people who we should rally around people and really hold each other up, bear each other's burdens and support each other. And yeah, that's one of the key pieces of friendship that we miss. Like it's not all the rainbows and sunshine side of it. It's also like I desperately need people to get through the craziness of life. And so that's why all this work is so important. It's not just about having a good time at the end of the day. It's also about being sustained for the long haul.
Yeah, and I think just a couple more thoughts on vulnerability. One, recently, two of my best friends, we don't have deeper conversations. And so I was just kind of like, and I love them and we have such a good time together. And I think guys would resonate with this maybe more than girls. I think girls talk to each other about real stuff way more. Guys, it's like, let's just hang out, drink beers and watch the game and not talk about our feelings and stuff. It's weird. But especially with this whole thing, that the premise of core life clarity and what we're doing, having deeper conversations, I almost kind of felt like a hypocrite by the two people that I'm kind of closest with. I'm not having those conversations with them. And I think why I bring that up is because I did just say, hey guys, I just want to say that we should be willing to go there sometimes. I'm not saying like let's still do the dumb stuff that we do and have fun. I need that escape, so to speak, and just I love that. But I think there's a whole other side of the coin of our relationship that we're missing out on, and I just don't want to see the relationship fail down the line. I'm not saying now, but in 10 years when we have a wife, kids, when life gets more hectic, I don't know, like I don't want that to I don't want that to be us. And so, I think a lot of guys especially are there where they have these close friends, but we're getting older, we're craving some of that depth, we're not talking about it. And what I'm saying is just say it. Like, "Hey guys, I'm just saying, like, I'm breaking the ice on just the fact that we can actually talk about the real stuff that we're going through because we're all going through it in our own ways. And I want to support you and support each other. Like, when you give me a call, when we talk, when we hang out, I'm just saying that I'm here for you and I'm willing to go there if you need it. Right. And they very quickly both said also that it's like, yeah, like we know. Like yeah, we don't really talk about real stuff. And it was a beautiful moment. And fear is a mile wide and an inch deep. Like I was kind of nervous going into that because we don't do that. Um, but I think that's just a little bit of a testimony to, I think, again, we're all the same, but we're all different. Don't be afraid to have the conversation. Uh, to just again, we're talking about having better friendships, having deeper relationships. We know we all want to go there, but it's getting over the fear of actually going there.
Yeah, I think it's a key part of being known, like having superficial conversations and interactions. I mean, it's part of life too. I love, shooting the breeze. Like, that's a good time as well, but it doesn't really achieve the goal of being known, Like, it doesn't separate you from the pack. Like, the fact that you listen to this particular music or follow the sports team, I mean, it's somewhat of an identifier, but it doesn't really get to the core of what's going on inside. So, yeah, I think contending for those deeper conversations is super important in allowing us feel known, like we were talking about before, that internal loneliness of not truly being known, even though you're around people. So, deep conversations really help open that up as well, open us up to being known, rather.
Yeah, and I think something that I personally do, and this is, I'm just being honest, it's probably not, I know it's not great, but I think when we're talking about vulnerability and actually being there for your friends, and something I do sometimes is like you're getting that call from that friend, and you're doing something, you're busy, and it's like, you hesitate for a minute. It's like, this better be good. You know what I mean? Like, this better be good. This better fill up my cup. He better have something for me. This better not just be like a, hey, let's shoot the breeze type conversation. And I think, I don't know, that's just a personal story. I don't know if other people feel that too, but it ties into everything we're talking about of the time, the busyness, and also just making room for your friends. Which reminds me of a video I saw recently of Simon Sinek talking about a situation with one of his friends where she was talking about how she was going through a really tough time, and previously, before they got together, she had texted him like a bunch of times, like randomly, like come over, like hang, you want to hang out, all this stuff. And in the moment, he's sitting there as she's explaining the tough time that she's been going through, and he's like, "What the hell? Why didn't you tell me?" And she's like, "What do you mean? I told you, like, let's hang out, let's do this, let's like come over." And he's sitting there like, what? That's not a cry for help. Like, that doesn't that's just like, how is that different than everything else you've done? And what they landed on, which is backed up in research, is that when someone is struggling, all they need is 8 minutes of help or support from a friend to get back on track, to have a good rest of the day, whatever that means. And so they came up with a code of texting, hey, do you have 8 minutes? And I share that because I think in a weird way it does tie into my best friend calling me and me being like, kind of just like sighing and this better be good and it better not take a long time because I got shit to do. But I think, hey, do you have 8 minutes? It's that vulnerability, like, hey, I need you. And I think if it's a two-way street thing, because one, you have to be willing to say, hey, I need to be vulnerable with you for 8 minutes, for just a little bit, because I'm struggling right now. And the other person saying, yeah, obviously, if you're struggling, I'm going to have time for you. But I think the time, I don't even know if this is making sense right now, but it's, for me, it's if I will always be there if it's something like real, like if you're really going through it, man, like I will drop everything. But what I'm also saying is if it's not, then I don't know if I have the time for you. And I just share that because that's right or wrong. I think it's kind of something that I've found myself in. But I think that, hey, do you have 8 minutes? I think a lot of your friends would say yes, 100%. Obviously, if you're going through something, I always have 8 minutes for you. And I think opening that door for communication around this to avoid the lack of connection, lack of vulnerability, and talking to our friends about what we're going through, that kind of cuts right through, hey, I need to talk.
Yeah, I think that's relatable. What you're saying is relatable on a number of levels. I think we've all been on the receiving end where you see a phone call or a text and you're like, oh gosh, what am I in for? So I can totally relate to that. And I think on the other side of that, being the friend or being the person who needs a little help or encouragement is sometimes it does take courage on our behalf too to really ask for what we need, like as much as we love if all of our friends were mind readers and could just anticipate our needs at all times, sometimes you do have to speak up and say, hey, do you have a minute? I really could use some help, or I could really use some encouragement. And I think that it's just an important piece of the puzzle. I know I'm guilty of this, where you don't explicitly ask for help. And I look back on situations where I say, wow, if I just had one friend or asked one friend for a little bit of support, like that problem would not have been as big as it was. So reminding myself of that, just to have courage and speak up when you need something from a friend. And those good friends, like, you'll find out who your true friends are, because the people who you can rely on to be there for you and to really support you and uplift you, like, they will show themselves, and it will become more clear as you do that. And then it'll be easier, and you kind of build on that dynamic of, oh, when I really need something or I really need encouragement, I know this person is going to give me what I really need, and something that's really helpful. And that's not to be like codependent on them to support you in every way possible, but yeah, it just weeds out a number of interactions that you could have, or rather than reaching out to everyone, then okay, these are my people who are in my corner who will support me, and hopefully then you can do the same for them, or kind of role reversal there.
Yeah, and that makes me think of kind of just traits of a good friend. I've thought about the people that I connect best with, and the people that I have those great conversations with, is people that are just non-judgmental. And you think about, well, why is that? Like, I could tell you anything, and you're not gonna judge me. Yeah, I think judging things, just generally speaking, is the root of so much bad. And that friend who you tell something that they can judge you, or you kind of open up and be vulnerable with them, and they do judge you, and that makes you feel like crap. Like, what? No one wants friends like that. But I think, even people that I'm not super close with, you just kind of have that energy and that feeling like I could tell you anything and it'd be okay. And I think that is just such an open door to having deeper relationships, having better conversations, because we can talk about anything, and I know that you're not going to go run and tell other people. You're not going to, after we're done here, like, talk shit about me in your head. Like, you can have that grace for me. And so, Megan, for you, what, I guess, traits do you look for in friends, slash, like, how can we be better friends ourselves, like, with those traits?
Oh, that's a great question. I totally agree with you about the grace. I mean, I don't think it takes long of like looking at yourself in the mirror and finding things that you're shameful of, that you're guilty of. Like, we're all imperfect people. And so I think we all know intuitively that without grace, like, we would be nothing. So I think that's a huge part of having close friendships with people. To give a super churchy answer, I mean, Jesus, what would Jesus do? What traits does
Yeah.
Jesus possess? But I think it's applicable regardless of your own personal relationship with the Lord or faith or religion. I think he has some good points there. Like, being gracious towards people, like not counting their flaws against them, being selfless, putting their needs before your own at times, or all the time. The more, the better, perhaps. Being supportive, coming alongside people, carrying their burdens when they need help, being encouraging, giving them the truth, even if it's hard. I think there's something extremely special when someone can be completely honest with you, because they're not worried about how you perceive them. They actually care about your well being more than their reputation with you. And so being able to share those hard truths, I think that's another really big variable. Yeah, those are just a couple of things. What do you
Yeah.
think? Do you have any
No,
other traits?
I'm glad you mentioned. To me, it's like being honest, because the other side of the non-judgmental grace thing that we're talking about, that I mentioned, is at the same time you have to be honest with your friend if they're being an idiot or doing something wrong. And I think you can do both. You can not judge and still be honest. But yeah, it's touching on having uncomfortable conversations. Uh, when I was in college, one of my best friends in the world was dating a girl that I didn't think was good for him, and I told him, and that was the closest we've ever been to fighting, and we've never really, like, it was bad, but at the end of the day, it didn't work out for those two, and he realized, shit, man, you were right, and it strengthened our relationship for sure. And I think it's also just not being afraid, right, to be honest, to say the hard thing, to go there, because it it's so hard for us to see it all ourselves when we're just living in it. And that applies to anything. I think zooming out and looking at it all big picture is a great thing to do for anything, but using a friend who sees everything from the outside, who has no internal idea of kind of what's going on in your life or what you're dealing with, I think is super beneficial. And it's taking ownership and caring about your friend to be able to tell them when you disagree too, and that being okay with disagreeing on things and saying, hey man, I don't agree with you, I think you're wrong, and that's okay. Like, I still love you. Like, I think it's just being honest is another one that just comes to mind.
Yeah. That made me think about, for me personally, one of the things that's been so transformative is again, I go back to my faith and how much that means to me. And having someone, in this case, Jesus, who's demonstrated all this love and sacrifice towards me. And I feel that has made me so much more secure and better equipped to love other people, even when it's hard. It's given me so much more courage. Not perfectly, that's for sure. I'm still working on it, but it's really empowered me to demonstrate that for other people. It's made me more secure, and so it's that cliche of, you can't pour from an empty cup. And so when the Lord fills that cup for you and makes you feel really secure in who you are, it's easier to pour into other people. And one of the quotes that I love, I don't know if this is relevant or will resonate with anyone, but is from The Return of the Prodigal Son. It's a book by Henry Nouwen. I'm not sure if you've read
I
it,
have
but
not.
super good. Highly recommend. But there's a section about how the Lord's love for us really empowers us to love other people, kind of like what I was saying. And it says, as the beloved, I can confront, console, admonish, and encourage without fear of rejection or need for affirmation. As the beloved, I can suffer persecution without desire for revenge and receive praise without using it as a proof of my goodness. And that's something that I come back to. Like, okay, am I really tapping into and connecting with the Lord so that I can be secure in His love, so that I can give that to other people without needing the reciprocity of that? And I think that just connects back to being courageous and honest, even when it's hard. I think it's easier to do when we are empowered ourselves.
No, yeah, I think that's beautiful, and I think, yeah, personally speaking too, it's, yeah, where do you get the strength and the example and all this stuff from? It is, yeah, Jesus, for me too. And I think another thing that comes to mind is just with traits of good friends is appreciating others. That's something I try to do, like positively reinforce good behavior. Like Megan, if you texted me or gave me a call and said like have a great day or something like that, that I would say thank you for telling me to have a great day. Like, thank you for reaching out. Thank you for the phone call. Thank you for the message. All this stuff, and like kind of be over the top with it too. Because also selfishly, I want you to do it again. If I want you to do it again, if it made me feel good, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna heavily appreciate that to make you want to make me feel better again, right? And I just appreciation for me, I think is a big one in terms of those friendships. And I think generally we don't appreciate each other enough. I know I don't appreciate people in my life enough. And I think it's just being intentional about it when the opportunity comes. It's expressing your gratitude. You did a good thing. You reached out. You did this for me. Thank you in a genuine, real, authentic way.
I've tried to be better about when I think something positively about someone, like let the thought exit my mouth and share that with them, because it's so much more powerful when you share it rather than just keeping it inside for me. Like it can be useful to someone else.
That's a much better way of putting what I just said.
Oh,
100%.
oh, was it? Did
No,
I just circle?
that's no. I mean that in a good way. Like that. Yeah, when you have that urge to encourage others. Again, we're all different, but we're all the same. Everybody wants to be encouraged, right? Everybody wants to be asked, I think, questions about them, genuine, real questions about themselves. People want to talk about themselves. Do you have any others that come to mind?
I think just being willing to meet people where they're at too, like being able to discern what someone else may need, and being flexible with that, not, what's the word, or maybe just tailoring how we care for people to the individual in front of us. I think that's a really great marker of a good friend.
Yeah, so I mean, we talked about a bunch, and I think just to go back to the beginning, like the problem, we all face the shedding and loss of friendships as we get older, because of all that we talked about. It's the Mel Robbins post, it's the numbness, it's the proximity, different timelines, energy. I think those are pretty good ways to discern issues in your friendships, or why maybe you resonate with some people and not others. It's all the stuff that we've talked about, and finally, like the proximity, unplanned interactions, the being vulnerable. Like that's how we can do this. That's how we can be better at it, because we can sit here and talk here all day about the problems and how we're all going through this and all that, but I think we do need to turn this into action somehow. And I hope with anyone listening that we're able to kind of give you ideas in terms of how to do this now, because to me the biggest takeaway is we cannot be passive about friendship anymore. And we talked about it, but if you want to be friends with someone, if you want that relationship to work, like take ownership yourself for it. Don't wait for the other person to text you. Don't wait for anyone else to do it but you, and see what happens. You know, if they blow you off, all right, well, maybe you try again, and if they blow you off again, then I don't know, cross them off the list, so to speak. Like it's kind of messed up, but I think it's just being intentional about all of this stuff, because if not, that's where the loneliness comes in. That's where the numbness comes in. All this stuff. And so, Megan, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, none of us are perfect, and we're all trying to figure it out. I'll be the first person to say that. And really trying to like love others well is a tall order, and one, like we said, you can't do without a ton of grace. But in a world that I feel like is so fixated on what's my purpose, what path should I be taking, and just being totally distracted by all these things that aren't bad. It's a part of life, but we can get distracted by all these other things that we give our attention and our time to. There's actually something really freeing and encouraging knowing that, like, what could be more productive than just loving the people around us well and really supporting them well. So that can help silence like all the other noise that tells us we have to make this amount of money or have this type of career or this type of house. It's like, well, you know what? The best thing we could do and most meaningful thing we could do with our lives, I truly believe, is to just to love and care for the people around us.
Well, yeah, just to go back to the studies that we talked about earlier, it makes you live longer. It's physical, spiritual, emotional, what I miss, mental health. Like all that stuff is the number one thing is relationships. And like sit with that for a second, like believe that. I know I have to believe that more. And kind of just to walk back that, like, I don't like that I just said cross them off the list. You gave me a weird look. I know you didn't like that.
Did I? Oh, I didn't even mean to.
No, but I think, again, like what would Jesus do? That's not what Jesus would do. I think it is still having that grace for people. I kind of meant that more in terms of, like, we do have limited time. We do have limited time, but I think not being afraid to put yourself out there and just see what happens, and dive in and be vulnerable and just go for it and realize that we are all the same internally. It may look different from the outside, and if we're able to do this stuff more, then I think we will get back in a way what we feel like we've lost over the years of to go full circle of the, hey, when's the last time you felt joyful and truly alive? Well, in college. I feel like that might be a lot of people's answer. It might be my answer in some ways. I don't necessarily think it is, but like think about that, and then think about, well, yeah, what would it look like if I actually really invested in just a few really important relationships to me, and how selfishly that could really help me out. And yeah, I guess I'll leave it with that.
Yeah, I feel like that's good. Yeah, there's something encouraging knowing that every new day that comes around is a new opportunity to get better at this. And so that would be my last closing my closing thoughts. My closing thoughts about my closing thoughts for people is just be encouraged. Don't be too hard on yourself. There's a new opportunity awaiting you to connect with others and do this a little better than you did yesterday.
And cut. As always, thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode. As I mentioned before, if you found this episode valuable, please share it with a friend. That's really how I want this thing to grow is people helping people. Now, as I end every episode, I just want to say don't try to remember it all, especially this one. Like, we talked about a bunch. And so my recommendation is pick like the 1 to 2 things that really jumped out to you, the ones that really resonated with you, and act on those. You know, maybe it's that reminder to text a friend every morning, or it's Megan's asking questions 1 to 10. I thought that was a great takeaway for me, at least. Because otherwise, like, if we don't make this stuff actionable, if we don't actually do it, we're just entertaining ourselves for a couple hours, which is fine, but real change happens from action. And so another thing I wanted to mention quickly here is the Core Life Clarity community. I believe we all don't get clarity unless we actually start talking about this stuff together. And so I've built a free anonymous Reddit community for quarter lifers to interact with each other together. I post in there twice a week, and I would love to have you join. The link to join is in this episode's description and every episode's description. Feel free to join there. It's super easy, super simple. And again, I'd love to have you in there with us. As always, thank you again for being here. Thank you for caring about quarter life clarity. And yeah, I'll see you next week.